There's no better revenge than dinner alone in silence.
3 years into my marriage with Emma, I genuinely believed we'd figured out the whole adulting thing successfully. We had matching coffee mugs sitting on our kitchen counter, a shared Spotify playlist full of songs we both pretended to like, and a mortgage that simultaneously made us feel proud and perpetually broke at the same time. I'm the calm, spreadsheet-obsessed financial analyst who gets genuinely excited about balanced budgets and free donuts in the break room. Emma was the ambitious marketing executive type, someone who could transform a PowerPoint presentation into something resembling a TED Talk that captivated audiences. She possessed this incredible ability to make every single idea sound like the next revolutionary concept and every meeting feel like pitching a Super Bowl commercial to eager investors. Together, we looked like a highlight reel of manufactured stability from the outside, me handling the mathematics while she worked the magic. We were that couple people used as proof that adulting didn't have to look like complete chaos, at least from the outside looking in. Emma was magnetic in ways I couldn't quite articulate properly, the type of woman who could probably convince a vending machine to dispense free snacks just by flashing that incredible smile at it. People at her office absolutely adored her, following her around like she was some kind of corporate celebrity everyone wanted to befriend. Her boss, Gregory Mitchell, adored her perhaps a touch too much for my personal comfort level. The man had developed this uncanny knack for appearing in our marriage like some terrible Wi-Fi signal, uninvited, persistent, and somehow always present during the absolute worst moments imaginable. Initially, I didn't think much of the situation at all. Everyone's got that one overly invested manager who behaves like the company's mission statement personally depends on knowing your weekend plans in extensive detail. But Gregory elevated dedication to Olympic championship levels that defied all logic and reason. This man texted her at 11 at night about font choices for presentations. Actual font choices. Who does that? "It's urgent, Emma," he'd declared dramatically, as if Helvetica versus Arial was somehow a matter of national security, requiring immediate attention and response. Every single time her phone buzzed with his name lighting up the screen brightly, she'd glance toward me with that quick, guilty expression, the exact kind you give when you're fully aware you're about to say something incredibly stupid like, "It's just work, nothing personal." Gregory simply values my input professionally, she told me one evening while curling her hair before bed like she was somehow preparing for a Zoom call in her sleep. "Sure," I responded with obvious sarcasm dripping from every word. "And mosquitoes just value your blood type, nothing personal about it." She rolled her eyes dramatically at that comment. "You're being paranoid again," she insisted with exasperation in her voice. Maybe I was being paranoid, but paranoia often turns out to be just intuition that's been burned before by painful experience. Still, I consciously chose to let it slide for the time being. In marriage, you carefully pick your battles strategically, and I was saving my ammunition for when it really mattered most. I kept telling myself it was completely harmless behavior on both their parts. After all, she came home every single night without fail. We ate dinner together at our kitchen table, watched terrible Netflix documentaries about cults and conspiracy theories, and fell asleep to the steady hum of our ceiling fans spinning overhead in lazy circles. That's normal married life, right? People text their bosses late at night all the time in corporate culture nowadays. Happens in every marriage these days with smartphones constantly buzzing. Then came the first office party, or as I prefer to call it, the night of unnecessary sequins and forced smiles that nobody wanted. Emma had been buzzing about it excitedly all week long, saying things like, "It's just networking opportunities and everyone's bringing their spouses to meet," which in my personal experience translates directly to, "Come watch me pretend we have the perfect marriage while we both slowly die inside from boredom and small talk with strangers." The event took place at this downtown hotel featuring valet parking, an actual red carpet entrance like some awards show, and enough champagne flowing freely to make the entire HR department visibly nervous about potential liability issues. Emma looked absolutely stunning that night, wearing a red dress with perfect curls, radiating that confidence that made her practically glow like she personally owned the entire building. I, on the other hand, was essentially the human equivalent of a neutral accessory, just another man in a standard suit, smiling politely and shaking hands with complete strangers, desperately trying not to look like someone actively counting how many shrimp cocktails it would require to make this entire evening worthwhile attending. Gregory spotted us the precise moment we walked through those doors. The man was literally impossible to miss in any crowd. Tall, with silver hair styled within an inch of its life, wearing a suit so sharp it probably required its own dedicated insurance policy and security detail. "Emma!" he called out dramatically, waving enthusiastically like he was flagging down a rescue helicopter in distress. "You look absolutely incredible tonight. Stunning, really." Then his eyes slowly slid over toward me with barely concealed dismissal and disdain. "And you must be Marcus, the famous husband I've heard about. The analyst, correct?" "The one and only," I said while shaking his hand firmly. He smiled that practiced politician smile, the exact kind that silently communicates, "I could effortlessly charm your grandmother while simultaneously foreclosing on her house without remorse or hesitation." "Lucky man," he stated with authority and confidence oozing from every pore. "She's the complete package in every way imaginable, truly exceptional." I smiled back politely, actively resisting the powerful urge to respond with, "And you're the complete red flag walking, sir." Instead, I simply nodded like a trained idiot. Yeah, I definitely know that already. Gregory wasn't merely Emma's boss in the traditional sense. He was essentially Mr. Perfect wrapped in Prada, the precise kind of guy who genuinely thought charisma qualified as a legitimate skill and networking constituted an actual personality trait. He strutted around that ballroom like a walking motivational quote calendar, greeting people with fake humility combined with Rolex flashes that could blind a small nation from across the room. I spent the majority of that long night standing dutifully beside Emma, watching as Gregory praised her campaign results like she'd just solved world hunger through basic email marketing techniques. "Emma's innovative approach to client retention is absolutely revolutionary," he announced into the microphone during his elaborate toast to the team. Revolutionary. The woman had found a marginally better method to send promotional coupons to customers via email. Don't misunderstand me here. I felt genuinely proud of her accomplishments and hard work. I was also acutely aware that Gregory's admiration arrived packaged with the subtle scent of expensive cologne mixed with midlife crisis desperation and obvious attraction. Every single time he leaned in too close to her personal space, my inner monologue started automatically building detailed spreadsheets of possible homicide alibis, but I maintained my composure throughout the evening. That's the thing about being the quiet guy in social situations. You learn exactly how to turn patience into a strategic advantage over time. When the party finally ended, Emma and I walked toward the car in the parking garage, her heels clicking against the pavement like applause for a performance nobody requested or enjoyed. "You were unusually quiet tonight," she observed, while unlocking the door with her keys. Just taking it all in, I replied carefully and diplomatically. "Great party overall. Your boss really knows how to deliver a memorable toast to the team effectively." She glanced toward me suspiciously. "Don't start with this again, please, not tonight." "Start what exactly?" "You're reading into things again like always, seeing problems that don't exist." I shrugged casually. "If by reading you mean noticing your boss stared at you like you were a motivational poster he wanted to purchase and frame for his office, then, yeah, absolutely guilty as charged." She sighed heavily, the specific kind of sigh that clearly communicates, "You're being dramatic and I'm far too tired for this conversation right now." "It's just professional respect, Marcus. Nothing more than that between colleagues." "Respect, huh? That what they're calling it nowadays in corporate America? God, you're impossible sometimes to deal with," she snapped. "Only sometimes?" I said with a grin, attempting to lighten the increasingly tense mood developing. She didn't laugh at that attempt whatsoever. The drive home remained quiet except for the persistent sound of her phone buzzing repeatedly in her purse. I didn't physically look at the screen, but I didn't actually have to look directly. Gregory's name glowed like a neon sign in my peripheral vision, impossible to ignore completely. She typed something quickly, then decisively locked the screen, just confirming the event recap details for tomorrow, she muttered defensively. "At midnight exactly. Deadlines, babe. They don't respect normal hours in marketing, you know that." "Sure thing, because marketing emergencies totally happen at midnight on Saturday nights regularly." I desperately wanted to say something meaningful, anything at all that might register. But the thing about red flags is this fundamental truth. At first, they genuinely look pink under romantic lighting conditions. You convince yourself it's fine and normal. You tell yourself she loves you deeply, that her loyalty isn't actually up for sale to a man who probably rehearses his compliments extensively in the mirror every morning before work. So I swallowed my instincts completely and convinced myself I was simply overreacting to normal work dynamics in modern corporate culture. It's significantly easier to ignore a fire when it's still just smoke billowing in the distance. Weeks went by in this strange pattern that became our new normal routine. The texts continued relentlessly throughout days and nights without pause. The late nights at the office became common enough that I started greeting her with, "Welcome home, part-time roommate," whenever she finally arrived exhausted and distant. She didn't laugh at that joke either, unsurprisingly. Our dinners together became progressively quieter, our smiles noticeably thinner and more forced with each passing day that went by. I caught her once smiling broadly at her phone during breakfast, her entire face lighting up like a teenager reading a crush's text message for the first time. "Who's that making you smile?" I asked as casually as possible without sounding accusatory. "Work stuff," she said quickly while locking her phone defensively and sliding it away. "You wouldn't understand it anyway. It's complicated industry things." "You're absolutely right, Emma. I wouldn't understand why a grown man with a wife and a pension is sending you emoji at 7:30 in the morning." Then came the night she didn't come home until 2 in the morning. I'd called twice with no answer whatsoever, texted once with concern. No reply at all to either attempt. When she finally walked through our door, her makeup was faded, her perfume barely hanging onto her skin and clothes. "Sorry," she said while dropping her purse heavily on the counter with a thud. "Last-minute presentation prep ran late. You know how it is in this business?" "Presentation prep that needed wine, apparently?" I asked pointedly, noticing the faint smell lingering on her breath. She froze mid-motion. It was a client dinner with Gregory. Nothing unusual about that at all. Her eyes flickered nervously. "He's my boss, Marcus. Standard procedure for client relations. Uh-huh. And I'm your husband. Remember me in this equation?" She threw up her hands in exasperation and frustration. "You're being absolutely ridiculous about this entire situation. Making mountains from molehills? Maybe so. But it's amazing how often ridiculous turns into right in the sequel nobody asked for or wanted." We didn't talk much after that particular confrontation in our kitchen. I went to work, came home, and started counting how many times she smiled at her phone versus at me throughout the evening hours. The phone was winning by a landslide margin every single time. One evening, I walked past her open laptop and saw a message preview pop up from Gregory on the screen clearly. "Couldn't have done tonight without you. You're amazing, truly exceptional." I didn't open it to read more details or context. I didn't need to see more evidence. Sometimes silence says enough on its own without words. I poured myself a drink instead, sat on the couch, stared at the framed wedding photo on our mantel, the one where she's laughing genuinely, and I'm looking at her like she's the only person existing in the world that matters. Maybe back then, she genuinely was everything to me. But right then, she looked like someone I was slowly losing to a man who thought leadership meant emotional trespassing without consequences or boundaries. That's when it genuinely hit me hard like a freight train. Maybe marriage wasn't about picking your battles carefully and strategically. Maybe it was about realizing when you were fighting a war you didn't even sign up for voluntarily in the first place. Gregory Mitchell wasn't your average middle-aged boss by any measure of comparison. He was the human version of a LinkedIn motivational post, all buzzwords and empty promises wrapped in expensive clothing. Leadership, vision, integrity, all catchphrases while probably sending inappropriate texts to someone who wasn't his wife during late hours. You know the type perfectly. Thinks synergy is an emotion, and team spirit can be purchased with pizza parties and corporate retreats at fancy hotels. The man was tall, silver-haired, and had a wardrobe that screamed, "I pay more for my tie than you pay for rent each month." I swear his cologne could file its own tax return independently with proper documentation. Every time he walked into a room, he made absolutely certain everyone knew it immediately through his presence. He had that aura that said, "I own stock in confidence, and I'm not afraid to show it to everyone around me." And unfortunately, my wife was one of his biggest shareholders emotionally and professionally. Emma would talk about him the way people talk about legends or celebrities they admire. "Gregory's a visionary," she'd say with stars in her eyes sparkling. "He's changing the whole company culture from the ground up, revolutionizing everything." Sure, because nothing screams innovation, like an executive who still calls female employees sweetheart in meetings without consequence. But she bought into it completely, all of it hook, line, and sinker. She admired his drive, his focus, his mentorship style with younger employees. Meanwhile, I was over here trying not to gag at the obvious manipulation tactics I could see clearly. The first time I met him outside that office party was at this stupid company brunch event for partners. Emma called it a casual networking event for spouses and significant others. Translation: you're coming with me, so I can prove my husband isn't a myth or imagination I invented. I put on my best, I'm not threatened by your boss face, and tagged along reluctantly to support her. We arrived at this pretentious downtown cafe where avocado toast cost more than my monthly car insurance payment combined. Gregory was already there waiting, of course, white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled precisely to show off a watch that probably had its own security detail and insurance policy. He stood up immediately, smiled that smug toothpaste commercial smile, and shook my hand like he was interviewing me for permission to date my wife exclusively. "Marcus, my man," he said enthusiastically, as if we'd been golfing buddies for years and shared inside jokes. "I've heard so much about you from Emma. All good things." "Oh, I bet you have," I said, trying to keep the smile from cracking visibly on my face. He laughed that loud, performative laugh bosses use when they're pretending to like you, but are really thinking about bonuses and promotions behind their eyes. "You're in finance, right? Numbers guy crunching data?" "Guilty as charged, that's me." "Ah, love that profession. The backbone of every successful company in America. You and I, we're the same really. Analytical, disciplined, detail-oriented individuals." I nodded politely. "Sure, except I don't send people emails at 11 p.m. about PowerPoint transitions and font selections that could wait." Emma shot me a warning glare, the kind that said, "Don't ruin this for me, please, I'm begging you." Gregory just chuckled. "Huh, you've got a sense of humor, Marcus. I like that quality in people." "Oh, I bet you do appreciate it. The brunch went about as well as you'd expect given the circumstances and tension." Gregory dominated the conversation like a man trying to win an Oscar for most self-important human alive in history. He talked extensively about his vision for the company's future, his revolutionary leadership style that inspired others, his passion for mentoring young talent and developing their careers, which, by the way, was corporate code for "I take too much credit for other people's work and ideas without acknowledgement." Every few minutes, he'd turn to Emma and compliment her like she was an award he'd won at a prestigious ceremony. "Emma, your campaign last quarter was outstanding, truly exceptional work. You have that spark, that indefinable quality that separates good from great," he said, touching his chest dramatically like he'd just witnessed fine art in a museum. "I always tell my team, surround yourself with people smarter than you are." Then with a smirk, which means I did something right hiring her onto my team initially. I smiled calmly without showing teeth. "Oh, definitely. You've got great instincts clearly for talent. I mean, 3 marriages can't all be flukes or coincidences, right?" The table went completely silent instantly. Gregory's smile flickered for half a second before he recovered his composure professionally. "Ah, well," he said, forcing a laugh awkwardly. "I suppose that's one way to look at experience and learning from mistakes." Emma kicked me under the table so hard my soul left my body temporarily. I took a sip of my coffee and said nothing further on the subject. I was calm. I was zen. I was also mentally digging a grave with his name on it for future reference. After brunch concluded, Emma unleashed on me the second we got into the car privately. "What the heck was that back there?" she snapped angrily at me. "What was what exactly?" "You humiliated him in front of people we work with." "Sweetheart," I said calmly, trying to diffuse. "He's a grown man with 3 divorces and a company therapist on retainer. I think he can handle a joke at his expense." "It wasn't funny at all," she insisted. "Neither is him calling you at midnight about work. But here we are living with it daily." She groaned, exasperated beyond measure. "You're jealous of him. Admit it." That word, that cursed word that ruins everything. The one that turns every rational concern into an emotional tantrum. "Jealous," I said, laughing genuinely. "No, Emma. Jealous is when I see someone else get the last piece of cheesecake at a party. This is observation and pattern recognition based on facts. There's a significant difference between the two." She crossed her arms and stared out the window, refusing to look at me directly. "You're impossible to deal with sometimes." "And yet," I said calmly and evenly, "you married me voluntarily. Wild decision, right?" The silence that followed could have frozen lava into solid rock formation. A week later, she invited me to another company function, Gregory's team celebration dinner for landing a client. Apparently, their department had landed a major client that everyone was excited about celebrating. "You should come with me," she said. "Gregory insists on partners meeting clients informally." I smiled. Oh, he insists personally. Then how could I possibly say no to that invitation? The dinner was held at a private dining room in a fancy steakhouse, the kind of place where the napkins have their own zip code and the menu has no prices listed. Gregory was, predictably, the loudest one there, by far dominating conversations. He stood up for a toast, glass of red wine in hand, raised high. To success and achievement, he boomed across the room. And to Emma, who's been the shining star of this entire campaign from start to finish without question. Everyone clapped enthusiastically around the table. I raised my glass too politely as expected. Then he looked at me, right directly at me, making eye contact, and said, "Marcus, you're a lucky man, truly fortunate." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it with that tone, like he was announcing that he'd personally approved my existence in her life. "You're lucky," he continued, smirking slightly. "She's the whole package, inside and out, complete." I grinned back, my voice sugar-coated poison disguised as charm. "Yeah, I know that already. Though it's funny you say that like you've been trying to test the packaging yourself personally and extensively." Laughter exploded around the table, awkward and nervous energy filling the space. Gregory blinked rapidly, smile faltering just enough to show I'd hit the mark directly. "You're a funny guy, Marcus, really witty." "Comes with a math degree," I said casually. "Keeps me sane in uncomfortable situations like these." Emma whispered urgently, "Please stop talking," through clenched teeth grinding. But I was just getting started warming up properly. After dinner concluded, Gregory approached me by the bar area. "Hey there," he said, clapping me on the shoulder like we were fraternity brothers reconnecting. "Listen, I hope I didn't cross any lines earlier tonight with my comments." "Lines?" I asked innocently, playing dumb. "No, of course not at all. You seem like a man who ignores boundaries regularly, professionally and personally, both without concern." He chuckled nervously, shifting weight. "You're a sharp one, Marcus. Very observant. Emma's lucky to have someone who keeps her grounded in reality instead of just yes men." "Yeah," I said, taking a deliberate sip of my drink. "And you're lucky HR doesn't have hidden cameras recording everything everywhere in restaurants." He froze for a beat, then forced a laugh uncomfortably. "You've got jokes, man. You should work in marketing with that quick wit of yours." "Nah," I said, smiling genuinely. "Too many clowns already in that industry." If Rock Bottom threw a gala, it would look exactly like Gregory Mitchell's client appreciation dinner event. Emma had been giddy about it excitedly all week long, insisting we go together as a couple. "It'll be fun and important," she said enthusiastically. "Everyone's bringing their partners to network," which I later learned translates directly to, "You'll stand next to me like furniture while people pretend to like you for appearance sake." We arrived at the Meridian, a restaurant so expensive even the valet looked judgmental of our modest car pulling up. I walked in wearing my navy suit professionally. Nothing flashy, just classic and appropriate. Emma looked like she'd walked straight out of a Vogue cover shoot ready for cameras. Her dress was sleek and elegant, her smile sharper than the steak knives arranged on the table settings. When I saw Gregory's face light up like a man watching a limited edition sports car roll past his window, I knew my instincts were clocking serious overtime hours. He stood there confidently, glass of wine in hand, with that trademark "I'm everyone's boss and best friend" grin plastered across his face artificially. "Emma," he said, his voice smooth as silk fabric. "You look like success itself personified tonight, absolutely radiant." I chuckled softly under my breath. "And here I thought success was supposed to be rare and exclusive, not common." He turned to me, eyebrows raised in surprise at my comment. "And you must be the lucky accountant who gets to watch success every single day at home." I forced a smile politely. "Financial analyst, actually, if we're being accurate. But sure, lucky fits the narrative, especially when success doesn't text me after midnight about presentation slides and font choices that could wait." A few people overheard my comment clearly. One person choked on their champagne, noticeably coughing. Emma shot me that "please behave yourself" look. Married people develop naturally by year 2 of marriage. The dinner started off civilized enough for corporate standards and expectations. Small talk flying, laughter echoing, fake compliments being distributed around generously. I sipped my wine slowly and counted mentally how many times Gregory found unnecessary excuses to touch Emma's arm or shoulder. By the 4th accidental brush of contact, I started wondering if I could write this off as a legitimate business expense for emotional labor and suffering endured. Then came the toasts that changed everything completely. Gregory stood up dramatically, raising his glass high for everyone to see. "Tonight," he said loudly, "we celebrate not just success, but excellence in execution and dedication. This team has shown unwavering dedication, creativity, and above all, passion for their work." His gaze landed on Emma like a spotlight illuminating a stage performer. And none more so than Emma Grant herself. Her work ethic, her brilliance. It's truly inspiring to witness firsthand daily. She's the heartbeat of this campaign, the soul of our success. Applause echoed around the room enthusiastically from all attendees. I clapped too mechanically because what else could I do in that moment? Gregory turned to me next deliberately. "And of course," he said, chuckling condescendingly, "we can't forget the man who supports her from behind the scenes quietly. You're a lucky guy, Marcus. Truly blessed. She's the whole package complete." I raised my glass slowly and smiled tightly. "I know that already, thanks, though I'm starting to think the package comes with a subscription fee I wasn't informed about initially." A few people laughed quietly, nervously around us. His jaw tightened visibly, but he covered it with another forced laugh. At one point during dinner, Gregory leaned in close to Emma and whispered something private that made her laugh softly, delicately, like a secret shared intimately between them. My grip on the wine glass tightened visibly until my knuckles turned white. Then he did it. The moment that turned the night from awkward to completely unforgettable. He leaned back in his chair casually, clearly 3 glasses deep into ego and alcohol, and said loudly, "You know, honestly, Emma could do way better than you, Marcus. No offense meant by it." Forks paused midair, frozen. Conversations died mid-sentence abruptly. You could hear the sound of collective discomfort settling over the entire table like dust particles. Emma gasped softly, audibly, eyes wide with shock at his audacity. Gregory smirked confidently, secure in his own untouchable status at the company. I set down my glass slowly and deliberately, smiled the way you do when you've already decided to burn everything down completely, and said calmly, "Gregory, I think you're absolutely right about that assessment." He blinked in confusion rapidly. "I am? You agree?" "Absolutely, without question," I said, leaning back casually in my chair. "You know all about people doing better in relationships. You've been married 3 times, after all. You've had the most practice at failure and disappointment." Laughter burst out before anyone could stop it or contain the reaction. The junior associate nearly spit out her drink dramatically. One of the clients coughed loudly into his napkin to hide a grin spreading. Gregory's face turned the exact color of his Cabernet wine in the glass. He stammered defensively, "Now that's not very professional behavior at a work function." "Professional?" I interrupted, feigning surprise convincingly. "You called your last secretary honey in a board meeting last year, didn't you? HR loved that one incident. I heard it's still trending internally in company gossip." Emma's face was pale as paper, bloodless. "Marcus, stop talking immediately," she hissed. But I wasn't angry at all, actually. I was calm, too calm. There's a certain kind of serenity that comes when you realize you have absolutely nothing left to lose anymore. "Relax, Gregory," I said, grinning widely. "We're just having fun here, right? You like to push boundaries constantly with people? I'm just exploring them with you in return." He tried to laugh it off awkwardly, but his hands trembled slightly visibly. The room was dead silent now, completely. I leaned forward across the table, lowering my voice just enough to make everyone lean in to hear. "Tell me honestly, Gregory, what exactly does better look like to you personally? Someone who works weekends and calls it passion? Someone who spends $3,000 on a designer suit but forgets his anniversary completely? Or maybe someone who calls his Tesla a reward for leadership but can't reverse park without the intern guiding him step by step?" Laughter rippled through the crowd again, louder this time echoing. Even the CEO cracked a restrained smile behind his glass, trying to hide it. Gregory looked like he was one PowerPoint slide away from a complete breakdown. "Here's to better, Gregory," I said, lifting my glass high in mock toast. "May you find it before your next inevitable divorce." That sealed it completely, and finally, the table erupted in mixed reactions. A few people clapped openly. Gregory's jaw clenched so tight I thought his expensive veneers might file for workers' compensation. Emma looked mortified completely. The rest of dinner was a blur of tension. Gregory avoided eye contact deliberately. The tension could have been sliced thinner than the steak. I just sat there, comfortably, sipping my wine, feeling strangely liberated finally. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of complete silence. Emma wasn't in bed beside me. I walked into the kitchen to find her already dressed for work professionally. She didn't look up when she said coldly, I can't believe you humiliated me like that last night in front of everyone. Good morning to you too, dear, I said sarcastically. She turned, jaw tight with anger. Do you even realize what you did to my reputation? I nodded calmly. Yeah, I turned dinner into a TED Talk about boundaries and respect. You're welcome for the lesson. Marcus, you embarrassed my boss in front of important clients deliberately. I smirked slightly. Technically, he embarrassed himself completely. I just provided running commentary on the obvious. That evening, she came home later than usual from work. Gregory wants to talk to you personally, she said seriously. He's inviting us to another dinner, just us three to clear the air. I smiled. Oh, perfect. A sequel. Maybe this time he can insult me before dessert arrives to save time. The next evening, I found myself walking reluctantly into yet another upscale restaurant for this meeting. Gregory was already there waiting, trademark smirk in place. Marcus, he said, extending his hand for a shake. Glad you could make it tonight. I shook it firmly. Wouldn't miss it for the world. I needed closure and entertainment both. For the first 10 minutes, the tension could have been cut with a butter knife easily. Then he leaned back and said it. Marcus, I just want you to understand something. Emma's got real potential in this industry. I see something special in her abilities. Let me ask you something directly, Gregory, I interrupted. When you text her late at night about work, is that strategy session before or after your wife goes to bed sleeping? He froze completely, wine glass halfway to his lips suspended. Excuse me, what are you implying? You heard me perfectly, I said, calm as a saint at confession booth. His face reddened noticeably with anger or embarrassment. Emma slammed her fork down loudly. Enough! Both of you stop this! Gregory tried to speak over her. You know what your real problem is, Marcus? You're threatened by your wife's success and can't handle it. I laughed genuinely at that. You think this is about success? No, Gregory. This is about respect and boundaries, something you've misplaced between your affairs and your self-promotion tours. I stood up deliberately, adjusting my jacket professionally. You ever talk about my marriage again publicly, I'll make sure your next job title is unemployed permanently. Your reputation won't survive the detailed PowerPoint presentation I'll make about you with evidence. I dropped bills on the table covering the meal. Enjoy your meal together. It's on me. Consider it my last investment in this circus you're running. Then I walked out confidently without looking back once. The next day, I went to work early at 6 a.m. I checked corporate filings meticulously, expense reports, travel reimbursements. Gregory's client dinners happened suspiciously often at the same restaurant, the same nights Emma claimed to work late. I compiled everything into an organized dossier. I made one polite call to Mr. Harrison, a board liaison I'd researched. I reported inappropriate conduct patterns involving Gregory at company functions with evidence. I sent audio files and screenshots anonymously. Harrison thanked me professionally for my concern about company reputation. A week later exactly, word spread that Gregory was taking indefinite leave from the company. When Emma showed up at my new apartment 2 days after the news broke, she looked completely destroyed emotionally. We need to talk urgently, she pleaded desperately. I let her in reluctantly. She revealed Gregory was fired officially, and the board suspected her of leaking evidence against him. She'd lost her job too in the investigation. I explained calmly it was just a professional anonymous tip with documentation. She broke down crying. When she asked if we could start over fresh, I laughed sadly. This isn't Monopoly, Emma. You don't get do-overs for rolling bad decisions repeatedly. Weeks later, she texted asking to meet one final time for closure. I agreed reluctantly. She looked smaller physically, powerless completely. I lost everything important, she whispered broken. Not everything, I corrected. You still have the ability to learn from mistakes. When she asked desperately if we could fix things between us, I held up my hand, stopping her. We're not broken. We're concluded completely. You can't rebuild something designed to collapse from the foundation. She whispered she never stopped loving me truly. I smiled sadly. I never stopped wishing you'd figured out what love actually meant beyond words. When she left finally, I didn't watch her go. Months passed slowly. Emma went freelance, posting LinkedIn philosophy about growth and learning from mistakes. Gregory was consulting, which meant unemployed with a fancy email signature. Me? I sleep peacefully every night. I bought a new couch, painted walls, fresh colors, deleted old playlists. Emma texted months later from a new number. Do you ever think about us? I smiled reading it and typed back, of course I do. Every time I see a bad manager on LinkedIn posting motivational quotes, I returned to my steak dinner, cooked medium rare exactly how I like it. That's what done really means. Not revenge or forgetting, but genuine peace that doesn't need an audience, apology, or closing dramatic line. Just you, finally living the life you were too busy defending to actually enjoy properly.